The sky over the capital city was filled with darkness, a heavy, suffocating shadow cast by the descending warships of the Valorian Empire. The fleet was massive, a looming presence that seemed to blot out the very sun itself. For days, humanity had fought valiantly against wave after wave of these relentless invaders, defending their cities and their families with everything they had. But now, this was the final assault, the last push to bring Earth to its knees. And it was working. The Valorians were ruthless, their technology far more advanced than anything humanity could ever hope to match. Their weapons were devastating, their ships nearly invincible. Earth's defenses were exhausted, strained to the breaking point, and the invaders knew it. Inside the underground command center, located in the heart of what remained of New York, General Evelyn Carter stood at the front of a large digital map. Her eyes scanned the various sections of the map, which flickered and shifted with updated reports of battles being fought all over the world. The red zones were growing larger with each passing minute, Valorian strongholds appearing across Earth like a plague. The war was clearly lost. At least, that's what every piece of information was telling her. But she wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. General, the Valorian capital ship has just entered Earth's atmosphere, an officer at one of the stations reported, voice tinged with panic. The fleet is in position for an all-out strike on our last remaining stronghold in New York. Evelyn's gaze never left the map. She could feel the pressure mounting. The weight of every life, every soldier under her command, pressed down on her shoulders like an unbearable burden. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table as she mentally processed their options. There were no easy answers. There were no miracles left. The Valorians had outclassed them in every way. But then again, the humans had always been the underdogs, the ones who weren't supposed to make it this far. And yet, here they were. The fact that they'd survived this long against an enemy of such overwhelming power was a testament to the strength of humanity's spirit. Her mind flashed back to the early days of the invasion, when Earth's governments and militaries had scrambled to respond to the first wave. The panic, the confusion, the sheer sense of helplessness. People had believed Earth was doomed. They had believed that the human race was just another stepping stone for the Valorians, that there was no hope. But then something extraordinary had happened. Humanity fought back. Not just with weapons, but with creativity, with ingenuity, with a resolve unlike anything the Valorians could have ever anticipated. They had used their knowledge, their cunning, their adaptability to turn the tide in so many battles. Against all odds, humanity had fought, and they had held their ground. "The Valorians are underestimating us," she said aloud, more to herself than anyone else in the room. Her voice was calm, but there was a fire behind it that burned brighter than any of the fear that had once gripped her. "They think we'll bend. They think they'll crush us and we'll give up. But they're wrong." The officers surrounding her exchanged uncertain looks. Some of them, like Major Thompson, had been through countless battles already. They had seen firsthand the overwhelming might of the Valorian forces, and they knew how grim their situation had become. "General, we've lost almost half our forces," he said carefully, his voice low. "We don't have the resources to fight back anymore. If we engage them now, we'll be wiped out in minutes." Evelyn's eyes hardened. "You're wrong, Thompson. This isn't about resources. It's about the one thing they can't understand about us. They think we're weak because we don't have their technology, their ships, their firepower. But they've forgotten one thing: we never give up. We're adaptable. And we'll use everything we've got to fight back. There's always a way." She turned back to the digital map, her mind racing. The war had come down to this moment, the moment when humanity either faced extinction or rose from the ashes to take back their world. She wasn't going to go down without a fight. They had come this far because of their stubbornness, their will to survive, and they were going to keep fighting until their last breath. "We don't need to match them ship for ship or weapon for weapon," Evelyn said, her voice growing stronger. "We need to outthink them, outlast them. The Valorians have never faced an enemy that doesn't fight by their rules. They don't understand us. We fight like animals, like creatures backed into a corner, and when you back a creature into a corner, it doesn't run. It fights." The room was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, the officers began to nod. They had seen what humans could do when pushed to the brink. They had seen the brilliance of human ingenuity in every battle, every ambush, every moment of desperation that turned into a surprising victory. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Evelyn's words sparked something in them, a flicker of hope, a glimmer of belief that they could still win. "Activate the secondary defense grid," Evelyn ordered, her voice cutting through the room with the authority of someone who knew that victory, even against overwhelming odds, was still possible. "Start coordinating with the remaining resistance groups. We're going to hit them where it hurts. We may be outgunned, but we have something they don't." She looked at the map again, her fingers tracing the lines where the Valorian forces had gathered. "We have humanity's heart. And that's what's going to win this war." The officers jumped into action, coordinating their efforts with the scattered human forces all over the world. They knew they had no choice but to trust in each other, to use every scrap of knowledge, every piece of technology, every ounce of humanity's resolve to strike back. And as Evelyn watched them all move, her chest swelled with pride. Humanity had always been at its best when the odds were stacked against them. And today, it would be no different. The command center buzzed with activity as the officers scrambled to execute Evelyn's orders. Their fingers flew over keyboards, inputting commands, coordinating with resistance groups across the globe, and preparing for an assault they knew would be their last stand. Major Thompson stood at the operations table, his eyes scanning the flickering screens that displayed live updates of the Valorian fleet's movements. The large map in front of them had shifted from red to orange as Earth's remaining defenses were strategically repositioned. "General," Thompson said, his voice taut with urgency, "we've got reports from Asia. Some of the resistance forces are reporting in with heavy losses. The Valorians are cutting through the outer perimeters faster than we expected. We'll have a window of less than 12 hours to launch our counterattack." Evelyn stared at the map, her mind racing. 12 hours. It seemed like nothing, and yet it felt like an eternity. The clock was ticking down, and every decision she made now would determine whether humanity would survive or be wiped from the face of the earth. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. "Not now." "We don't have 12 hours, she replied sharply. "We have less. Prepare the high-altitude bombers. We're going to move the defensive grid closer to the Valorian fleet. We'll make them think they've got us cornered, and then we hit them hard. We're going to cripple their communications network first. If we can cut them off, they won't know where the next blow is coming from." Thompson's eyes narrowed as he understood her plan. It was risky, beyond risky. It would require the last of their strategic assets, and there was no guarantee they would make it out alive. But then again, there hadn't been any guarantees since the first invasion began. Humanity had learned that they weren't going to survive by playing it safe. "You're talking about pushing into the heart of their fleet with everything we've got left," Thompson said slowly, weighing the options. "We're going to be outnumbered, outgunned. They'll destroy us before we can even get close." Evelyn turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "You've seen how we fight, Thompson. We're not like them. We don't need to play by their rules. It's not about what we have. It's about what we can do with what we've got left." Thompson's face softened, and he nodded. There was no more doubt in his mind. This was humanity's final shot, and there was no turning back. "I'll have the bombers prepped and ready." "Good," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the air like steel. "Tell the remaining resistance groups to get into position. We need them to attack from the east and the south. Once we hit them from the north, we'll trap them between our forces. They'll be blind." As the officers dispersed to their stations, Evelyn turned her attention to a smaller screen in the corner of the command center. It was a secure line, a direct channel to Earth's leaders. She had requested an update from them earlier, but she hadn't heard anything in hours. She wondered what was happening in the outer colonies, the places that had once stood as symbols of human progress but now felt so distant and irrelevant. The first wave of the Valorians had wiped them out with ease. There was no hope of reinforcements from those far-flung outposts. Everything had come down to this. The screen flickered, then went dark. After a long moment of silence, the voice of the president crackled through, filled with static but unmistakably urgent. "General Carter, we've received word from the last Standing Council on Mars. They're requesting immediate assistance." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Mars. The colonies there had always been the last bastion of human hope, the symbol of their expansion beyond Earth. If the Valorians had moved in and crushed Mars, there would be no turning back. No place left for humanity to retreat to. "What's the status?" she demanded, her mind already racing with the implications. "We don't have the full details," the president's voice replied, "but we've received confirmation that the Valorians are preparing a full-scale assault on the Martian colonies. If they fall, it's only a matter of time before they push to the asteroid belt and then move on the outer rim. We need to." Evelyn didn't wait for the rest of the message. She had already made up her mind. "We'll handle Mars later. Right now, Earth's survival depends on this next attack. We can't lose focus. I'm going to take the Valorians' command center off the grid. Once their communications are down, they won't be able to coordinate their assault." The president's voice hesitated for a moment. "General, are you sure you want to move forward with this? If we fail..." "If we fail, Earth falls," Evelyn snapped, her voice hard. "But if we win, we get a chance. And that's all we need." The line went silent for a moment, then the president's voice softened. "Understood. Good luck, General. Humanity's future is in your hands." Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't need to. The weight of her responsibility, the lives hanging in the balance, was enough. She turned to the officers around her, their faces a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and determination. They were all in this together, and they knew what they had to do. "We're taking back Earth," Evelyn said, her voice rising, filling the command center with a renewed sense of purpose. "We're going to make them regret ever stepping foot on this planet." One by one, the officers nodded, their expressions steeling with resolve. There was no time for second-guessing now. The battle would be fierce, the losses heavy, but there was no turning back. Humanity would fight to the very last. And if that meant making the Valorians regret their decision to invade, so be it. As the plan began to unfold, Evelyn stepped back from the operations table, eyes burning with an intensity that couldn't be ignored. The time for retreat was over. This was humanity's moment, and they would make their stand. No matter the cost. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the first waves of human resistance forces began their advance. The air crackled with static, the faint hum of warships hovering overhead, mixed with the frantic orders being shouted across the communication channels. Evelyn Carter stood in front of the command center's largest screen, her hands gripping the edge of the table as she watched the live feeds of the various resistance units mobilizing. Despite the odds, the rebellion had found a glimmer of hope, or at least the will to fight. And that was enough to get them started. As the air shifted and the roar of bombers reverberated through the corridors, Evelyn felt a strange mixture of determination and dread. Each step they took toward the Valorian fleet felt like it might be their last, but they had to keep moving forward. Earth's future depended on this counterattack. The Valorians had underestimated humanity's resolve, and they were about to learn just how dangerous a cornered species could be. In the heart of the battle zone, soldiers scattered across the outskirts of New York's ruins were preparing to engage the Valorians head-on. The alien forces, enormous and technologically advanced, had made their landing with little resistance, assuming that the humans would surrender or be wiped out. They had no idea that Earth's inhabitants would come together with such ferocity, using whatever weapons they could find, from hacked alien technology to homemade explosives. Humanity had learned to adapt and innovate in the worst of circumstances. They had learned how to fight back. Inside the makeshift command room, Major Thompson was coordinating the ground assault. His voice echoed through the comms as he relayed orders to the soldiers moving into position. "Hold your ground. This is our chance to break their lines. We need to hit them hard, push them back. Don't give them an inch." His eyes were sharp, despite the exhaustion lining his face. He had seen too many battles, too many sacrifices. But he had also seen the fire in his comrades' eyes, the same fire that had brought them this far. And it gave him the strength to carry on. "General, we've got visual on the Valorian communications hub," one of the junior officers reported from the operations table. "They've got heavy defenses surrounding it, but we've got a clear shot to breach if we move now." Evelyn's eyes snapped to the screen, her mind racing through the next steps. The communications hub was the key to the entire operation. If they could take it down, they would disrupt the Valorian fleet's coordination. Their forces would be left scrambling, vulnerable. It was a risky move, but the clock was ticking. Every moment they wasted, the Valorians grew stronger. "Send in the Special Forces team," Evelyn ordered, her voice resolute. "Use the diversion to draw their fire. Get in, take out the hub, and get out. We won't get another chance." The room went quiet as the orders were passed along. The soldiers on the ground moved with a sense of purpose, every action calculated and precise. They knew that this mission was more than just a strike against the Valorians. It was a message. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were fighting for their right to exist. Outside, the scene was chaotic. The streets of New York had been reduced to rubble, littered with broken structures and the twisted remains of vehicles that had been caught in the crossfire. The once vibrant city, now a war zone, was the site of humanity's last stand. It was almost poetic in a way. The Valorians had seen Earth as an easy target, an insignificant planet in the grand scheme of the universe. But they had underestimated the heart of its people. The Special Forces team, a group of the most skilled soldiers humanity had left, moved through the wreckage with stealth and precision. Their faces were grim as they navigated the crumbling buildings, each step taking them closer to the Valorian command center. The soldiers had learned to rely on each other, forming a bond that was unbreakable. They didn't fight just for themselves. They fought for every man, woman, and child who had been left behind in this war. As the team neared the communications hub, they paused, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. The Valorians had set up a perimeter around the hub, armed with energy shields and heavy weaponry. It would be no easy task to breach. But these were soldiers who had fought alongside their fellow humans through the darkest days of the invasion. They had nothing left to lose. The stakes were too high. "We're going in," the lead soldier whispered into the comms. "On my signal." A heartbeat passed. Then, the signal came, a flash of light as an explosive charge went off, creating a massive distraction and drawing the attention of the Valorian forces. In that split second, the team sprinted forward, ducking behind debris, their weapons raised. They opened fire, taking out several of the enemy soldiers before slipping into the shadows. It was a blur of motion, flashes of energy weapons, the screech of metal on metal, and the thunderous explosion of grenades. But amidst the chaos, the team was relentless. They had one mission: to cripple the Valorian command structure. Seconds later, the communications hub came into view. A heavily fortified structure, surrounded by an army of alien soldiers, the heart of the Valorian assault. But the humans didn't flinch. They had no fear left. Their resolve was absolute. The lead soldier motioned for the others to advance, and together they moved in, firing as they went. Explosions rocked the area as Valorian soldiers fell, their shields flickering before collapsing. The humans pressed forward, determined to complete their mission. And then, just as the team reached the outer walls of the hub, a massive explosion shook the ground beneath them. It was the final strike. The bombers had arrived. The sky above was lit with the glow of fire as their bombs fell, tearing into the Valorian defenses with devastating force. The Valorians, who had thought they were untouchable, were left reeling from the barrage. The communications hub cracked, its systems shorting out as the structure crumbled. A deafening silence followed the destruction. Humanity had struck a blow, and it was a blow that would resonate throughout the galaxy. The Valorians were no longer coordinated. They were no longer the unstoppable force they had once believed themselves to be. For the first time in the battle, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. There was hope. Against all odds, humanity had proved that they were not to be underestimated. The war was far from over, but it was no longer a fight for survival alone. It was a fight to win. The command center was buzzing with reports. The lights flickered as an alert system blared, signaling that the Valorian fleet had finally responded to the chaos. Evelyn's heart raced as she saw the incoming status updates on the massive screen in front of her. They had done it. The communications hub was destroyed. The Valorians were scrambling, unable to coordinate their forces effectively. But this victory was only the beginning. The real test was about to begin. "General, the Valorian fleet is retreating into a defensive formation," Major Thompson reported, his voice filled with urgency. "They're regrouping. We've disrupted their communications, but they're not completely disoriented. If they reorganize and counterattack, we might not survive." Evelyn clenched her jaw, steeling herself against the weight of the situation. "They won't get the chance to regroup. We've been playing defense for too long. Now, it's time to go on the offensive." She turned to her officers, her voice calm but firm. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to hit them while they're vulnerable. We'll send in everything we've got. Fighters, bombers, the resistance forces on the ground, We're going to force them into a retreat they won't recover from. And we do it now." The officers nodded, quickly moving to execute her orders. The decision was bold, reckless even, but Evelyn wasn't going to sit back and wait for the Valorians to recover. She had seen what they were capable of. Their overwhelming power, their unrelenting precision, they had nearly crushed humanity. But now, for the first time in this war, humanity had the upper hand. The Valorians had underestimated them. They hadn't anticipated the strength that could come from a species backed into a corner. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the remnants of Earth's forces had taken to the skies. Humanity's fleet was a patchwork of old warships, hastily reassembled fighters, and modified transport vessels. But what they lacked in technology, they made up for in resolve. The soldiers aboard those ships were willing to do anything to ensure Earth's survival. They had already sacrificed so much: families, homes, entire cities, and now it was their turn to make the final stand. The fighters zipped through the broken clouds, weaving in and out of fire as they dodged Valorian laser beams. The bombers trailed behind, their massive payloads armed and ready for the final strike. A deafening roar erupted from the engines of the bombers as they broke through the sky, each one a potential death sentence for the Valorian fleet. The Valorians had failed to anticipate the sudden aggression of the humans. They were still reeling from the destruction of their communications hub. Evelyn's eyes were locked on the battle map as the live feeds of the combat unfolded in front of her. There was no room for hesitation now. Humanity had thrown everything they had at the Valorians, and the results were becoming clear. The alien fleet, once so organized and confident, was beginning to splinter. Their once impenetrable formation was faltering, their counteroffensive sluggish and uncoordinated. "We've broken their lines, General," Thompson's voice crackled over the comms. "The outer defenses are down. Our bombers have hit their flagships. It's chaos out there." "Good," Evelyn said, but she didn't feel the rush of triumph she had expected. This wasn't over yet. "Keep pushing. No mercy. Hit them again. We cannot let them regroup. This is humanity's last chance." Her words echoed in the minds of the soldiers on the front lines. They weren't fighting for land, or resources, or political power. They were fighting for something far more primal: survival. The Valorians, for all their technological superiority, hadn't understood that simple fact. Humanity was a species defined by its resilience, its refusal to surrender. Even when pushed to the edge, they found a way to fight back. Inside the cockpit of one of the fighter jets, Captain Daniel Reed was locked in a fierce dogfight. His hands gripped the controls, his eyes narrowed as he locked onto a Valorian ship in the distance. The alien fighter's massive size and advanced weaponry should have made it an unstoppable force. But Daniel had something it didn't: desperation. Humanity's will to survive coursed through his veins. As he dove toward the enemy ship, his heart pounded in his chest, every breath a reminder of what was at stake. "Target acquired," Daniel muttered to himself as he lined up his shot. With a deep breath, he pulled the trigger. The missiles launched, slicing through the air like a comet, and hit the Valorian ship dead on. A massive explosion erupted in the sky, and the alien vessel began to disintegrate. Daniel barely had time to breathe before he was already pulling up, weaving his fighter through another barrage of enemy fire. The adrenaline coursing through his body kept him alive, kept him focused. This was humanity's fight, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Back in the command center, Evelyn could see the effects of their attack playing out in real time. The Valorians were struggling. Their ships were taking hits from every angle, their weapons failing to land with the same deadly precision they had shown in the early days of the invasion. The Valorians were accustomed to total control, to unchallenged dominance. Now, for the first time, they were the ones scrambling. But Evelyn knew better than to get complacent. The Valorians were still dangerous. They were still powerful. Their retaliatory strikes had the potential to wipe out entire cities in an instant. There was no room for mercy. Humanity had to keep the pressure on, push the Valorians to the brink, and force them into a retreat. Hours passed in what felt like an eternity. The battle raged on, each side taking hits, but humanity's determination was undeniable. With every explosion, every fighter that soared into the sky, humanity's resolve grew stronger. They would not let Earth fall. The screen in front of Evelyn finally flickered, and the report she had been waiting for came through. The Valorian fleet was retreating. The once proud invaders were pulling back, their formation broken, their ships in disarray. The tide had turned. For the first time in the history of the war, the Valorians were running. Evelyn allowed herself a moment of relief, but only a moment. The war was far from over. The Valorians had underestimated humanity's will to survive, but Evelyn knew they would return, with more firepower, more forces. Earth's fight wasn't over. Not yet. But this battle, this fight for survival, had shown the galaxy something important. Humans, no matter how far pushed, were not to be underestimated. And as long as they had the will to fight, they would never surrender.